Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I am I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak on Bill 4, the Public Interest Disclosure Act. And while I appreciate the hard work that the Minister has put into crafting Alberta's first piece of whistleblower legislation, I have to get on the record that I'm bitterly, bitterly disappointed in Bill 4. And I'll tell you why, Mr. Speaker. I, as the leader of the official opposition, has said in her speaking notes, I have been working on the whistleblower legislation for some time. In fact, if you go into the order paper, you can find my motion that is going to be debated hopefully sometime this fall, depending. I doubt if we'll have time to be able to debate it because of the timing. But I also am bringing forward a private member bill in the spring session, which happens to be the second private member bill that we'll be dealing with in the spring session. So I was excited about having the opportunity when I heard that the government was bringing the whistleblower legislation to the House. And I guess maybe I was in fantasy land, or had been maybe into something I shouldn't have been, because I had a lot of hopes on what the Premier had talked about, you know. Well, I'm not a lawyer, really? Mr. Speaker. She is. And I guess my disappointment is, and we have several lawyers on both sides, actually, and I can tell you I've sat down with the lawyers on our side, and we've discussed this piece of legislation, and I'm not going to go into a great detail about what they've said, because every single member of our caucus tonight is going to be speaking on Bill 4. And that's how strongly they believe about what they don't see in our Bill 4. And it's interesting when I read the Bill 4 on the front cover, and it says Bill 4, the Public Interest Disclosure Whistleblower Protection Act. It's the Associate Minister of Accountability, Transparency, and Transformation. And I have to really ask the Minister, where is the accountability in this bill? Where is the transparency in this bill? And where is the transformation in this bill? I think, Mr. Speaker, one of the nice things about being a member of the opposition, and we've heard various speakers in front of me talk about Mr. Hutton from FAIR. And I've had the opportunity to converse with Mr. Hutton since, I guess, late spring, the summer, in regards to his vision of whistleblower legislation. And what was interesting when I talked to David is the fact that he said, well, you know, Heather, the government is bringing forward this whistleblower legislation. And you know that the Premier has said how she's going to be open, accountable, and transparent, and she's going to govern different. So we're really quite excited about seeing this whistleblower legislation. So he said, yes, we'll certainly help you, because we think it's important to have a very comprehensive piece of legislation. We think it's important to have a concise piece of legislation. And more importantly, we think it's important that this piece of legislation does what whistleblower legislation should be doing, and that's to protect the whistleblower. So I was lucky enough to get an email from David, and David has, in my mind, no political stripes. I've never asked him how he feels. In fact, I think the honourable member from Mountain View was one of the previous directors or volunteers on FAIR, so there's no political stripes, so you can't be blamed, oh, well, he's a supporter of the Wild Rose, because I doubt if he is a supporter of the Wild Rose Party, to be honest with you, but he certainly has provided us a good analogy of how he feels about the whistleblower legislation. And they have concluded that this is a misleading named piece of legislation which shields the government from damaging disclosures, may be used to protect government wrongdoers, and does not protect whistleblowers at all. He goes on to say, this law is a backward step because it does the opposite of what it claims, effectively shielding the government from embarrassing publicity while doing nothing to protect the whistleblowers or the public. Mr. Speaker, those are two very, very, very damaging statements. In fact, if I was the Minister of Accountability, Transparency, and Transformation, I got to tell you, member from Fort McMurray Cochrane, my spidey senses would be going, ooh, we have a problem here. I was a previous member of this government. Your legislation goes through a grueling process, and I don't know if it's changed, and I mean, maybe you can tell me, but I know you have your process of legislation where you go through legislative review. You have a bunch of lawyers and your Leg Review Committee around you, and they tell you about what's right in the legislation and what's wrong in the legislation. And I have to ask you, Minister, did you do that? I cannot, for the life of me, and I've been in this legislature for a long time, and I hate bloody well saying that because then that just ages you.
How old are you?
And I've got this young leader beside me that, you know, it's like the old chicken and the new chicken. I don't know, something old and something new, something borrowed, something blue, and I'm the old one. How you can even seriously consider tabling this legislation. I have gone through this bill, page by page, word by word, spent my entire weekend, was supposed to be celebrating my wedding anniversary on Saturday, and I said, you know what, honey, I'm sorry, I got more exciting things to do. I'm going to read the whistleblower legislation. I mean, that really impressed him. Minister, honest to goodness, maybe you and I should get together, and maybe you and I should read this legislation, and maybe you can explain to me, you can explain to Fair, who's probably North American renowned on whistleblower legislation. In fact, they get called on whistleblower legislation all over the world. And if you talk to Mr. Hutton, he'll say to you, Minister, maybe you should look at the Australian model, or maybe you can take a little bit of the model that's happening in the States, because he won't be able to, he says, this is the worst piece of legislation in Canada by far. And he's very critical about other pieces of legislation that have been tabled in other legislatures across this country. By far, he said this is the worst legislation in the country. I was at your news conference where you and the minister, Service Alberta minister, stood up very proudly in front of a whole bunch of press and said this is groundbreaking, this is leading, this is, I don't know what else you said about the legislation. I'll have to go back and I thought, well, maybe we are on to something. Maybe this is an exciting piece of legislation. When the member from Biche and my other member from Lacombe-Pinoka was briefly going over the legislation as the critics, because, Minister, we've got 3 critics on this piece of legislation because that's how important the Wild Rose thinks this legislation is. We were all we're briefly reading this legislation and we're going, oh my God, oh my goodness, oh crap, this is a bad bill. And I'm reading it. Well, I know the member from Whitemud, a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, okay? I'm really excited to have the lawyer from Edmonton Whitemud get up and give his legal opinion of Bill 4. I'm not a lawyer, so I think that's important. You know, Mr. Speaker, I think what Albertans were expecting was a big step on this piece of legislation. It was the first time that we were going to allow government employees, servants of the public, to come forward when they know of law-breaking and gross mismanagement in the public sector, because they understand, our hard-working frontline workers, the vital need for our democracy in this province. Checks and balances in this province aren't just about the governing party and the opposition party, or the provincial government and the federal government. It also includes civic-minded people coming forward bravely enough to say enough is enough on illegal behavior in our government. I have to tell you, Mr. Chair, I admire whistleblowers, or Mr. Speaker. I admire their bravery in the face of the governing party. I've been in government, and I've been in the opposition, and I've been in the front bench, I've been in the back bench, I've been in the side bench, so far outside. One of my constituents asked me if I was going to be in the men's washroom in the next move. I know how it feels. I want to roll. I absolutely know how it feels, honestly, Mr. Speaker, to be in the wrath of government. And I know when you say to yourself, enough is enough, enough is enough. When I made my decision to change parties, it wasn't easy. I've spoken about that. I faced threats. I faced intimidation. I lost relationships with people that I thought were close friends. Some of those people, Mr. Speaker, have not spoken to me to this day. But you know what? I made the right decision, and I made the decision on the behalf of the people that I serve. I cannot imagine how a government employee would feel confronting their bosses, putting their jobs on the line by speaking out about what they believe in and what they think is right. They're not only risking a paycheck, a job, they're likely risking their livelihood and their career. If you work for the government of Alberta and blow the whistle, your career is effectively over. It's their way or it's the highway. I think of people like Dr. Tony Malioka, respected around the world, not only in this province, but around the world. He worked hard every day to ensure that Albertans were safe. He did what he thought was right. He took the issue with how cancer care, in his opinion, was being degraded to save a few pennies. Diagnoses could be made incorrectly, just like in other Canadian provinces that made the same mistake. You know what? Predictably, his contract wasn't renewed. Was it because he wasn't skilled enough? No. His skills allowed him to be in charge in the first place. It was because he spoke up. He had the confidence and the bravery to speak up for the cancer patients in this province. Where is he now? He's in Florida. He is at one of the premier cancer clinics in the world now. He couldn't find a job here, and now all Albertans are suffering because people in this government couldn't handle what he had to say. And, Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, that is disgusting. In light of Dr. Malioka's personal experience, as I indicated earlier, I was excited about the Whistleblower Protection Act. I really was. It's about time. But, Mr. Speaker, I've indicated I'm truly disappointed in the content of this bill. There are so many flaws that I've run out of time. I'll run out of time mentioning them. The leader has spoken about some of the flaws in the bill. I can guarantee you that we are going to bring forward, as this party, many amendments to try and band-aid the bill so that we can protect the people who truly want to do the right thing, and that's to blow the whistle on this government.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Standing order, questions or comments under Standing Order 29-2A? Honourable Member for Lac-La-Biche, St. Paul,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was an article on October 23rd, and it said how the whistleblower minister would blow the whistle, and bizarrely he said that instead of going to the whistleblower official, he would go straight to the ethics commissioner. So you had the minister who actually put forward this legislation saying that he wouldn't even go to the whistleblower commissioner. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, whether or not that just shows another flaw in the legislation.
Honourable Member.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I mean, if you have a Minister of the Crown speak and he's asked about how he's going to do, how he would deal with whistleblowing, and he thinks he goes to the Ethics Commissioner, I think there's two mistakes here. The first of all, he blatantly is saying that he doesn't support his own whistleblower legislation. There's just no question. And secondly, I don't think the Ethics Commissioner is somewhere that is possibly the right place to go. I just think, I'm hoping, I'm sure this member from Fort McMurray Conklin is listening, and I'm sure, knowing he's the Minister of Accountability, Transparency and Transformation, that I guess we're going to ask him to do the right thing. The leader has spoken about maybe he'll consider moving this to a committee. But those are things that I think need to, as we move forward, we're anxious, as the Wild Rose, to have the opportunity to hear what the government has to say. There's 62 of them, there's 17 of us, and I think it's key. How many of them are there? 61. Oh, sorry, 61. Sorry. I think, I honestly believe, I can see Edmonton Gold Bar is just getting really excited about the debate, and I can hardly wait to hear him get up, because I know he's very compassionate and concerned about his constituents, so I can't wait to hear him stand up and speak in support of this legislation, or, for example, maybe recognize the errors of this legislation, and I quite frankly look forward to the debate.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there other comments or questions under 29-2A? The Honourable Member for Innisfail-Sylvan Lake.
I would just like to ask the Honourable Member that when she was the Minister of Children and Family Services and also the sole gen of this fine province, did she ever run across a direct opportunity where people wanted to come forward and knew for sure they would lose their job, and if she could explain how those people felt about that?
Honourable Member.
Well, I have to say I was very, very fortunate with the people that I had that worked for me in the Solicitor General and the Minister of Children's Services. We had an open door policy. And the open door policy was the fact that if there was a concern that they were dealing with the ministry, then they knew that they could come to the minister without any fear of reprisal. And I had the opportunity on several occasions when people that worked in the department for me came forward and brought a concern to me, and I think I dealt with it in a very fair way. Will that same thing happen at this particular time? I doubt it. I mean, we've seen over and over and over again what's happening in our health industry. I can tell you, and the leader has mentioned it, we have had, I might have a day go by that I don't get a call, but I can tell you that I'm considerably busy, as you are, member, as a seniors critic now, so you can get a little, you know how many concerns and complaints that we get on a daily basis that want to talk. And I mean, I have spent so much time talking to the wonderful doctors and healthcare professionals in this province that we've given our word that we're going to fight on their behalf so that the end of bullying and intimidation in this province will come to a stop.